Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Leading Innovation Interactive Q&A session. I'm Sam, an associate professor at the UNSW Business School and your academic lead for this year's Learn to Lead, Leading the Future. I'm here today with Professor Mary Ann Williams, who is our fearless leader of the Business AI Lab, and she'll be answering all your questions on how to lead innovation. Today, I'm calling from Frankfurt. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which you are calling in from today, wherever that may be across the country or across the world, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Today's interactive Q&A is an opportunity for us to dive a little deeper into the topic leading innovation, and for you to ask any questions that you may have on this module. But before we get started, like the previous three sessions, I would like to have a little housekeeping. So as this is our final interactive Q&A session, I would like to remind everyone that to receive your digital badge, make sure to complete all video recordings and the multiple choice questions. There are 15 of them for each of the 4 modules, and to complete the evaluation survey on the Your Digital Badge tab in Navigator. Once completed all these tasks, there should be a little green circle with a check mark next to it. Otherwise, if you haven't completed the task yet for the videos or the MCQ, the circle will be orange. If you haven't received your digital badge by Friday, June 23rd, I believe, just please contact us, and you'll receive an email from UNSW via Creditly, which is the digital badge provider, once your digital badge has been issued. Please note that this can take a few days. Okay, now we're going to start almost with our submitted questions. We've handpicked a few that we think represent kind of popular themes that people were asking about, and Mary Ann will answer those first. After that, we'll move on to the real-time questions, which please just post in the Q&A. And we'll just try and endeavor to get through as many answers as possible in the time that we have. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the Learn to Lead Navigator platform following the session. So up first, and this is just kind of keeping with the theme on leading the future and just what that future will look like, which we've asked all of our panelists so far. And so Mary Ann, what potential changes do you envision for this world in the next 10 years as a result of technology and innovation, and how might these advancements reshape the concept of leadership and the required skills necessary to lead?
Okay, so that's a biggie. Thanks, Sam. And so, Niels Bohr said, it's impossible to predict, especially the future. And I think that is more true now than ever before, because people shape the future. People determine, we don't forecast it, we make it. And in sort of prior, big transformations, it's been sort of experts mainly pulling the strings and doing the shaping. Whereas now technology is totally democratized. And so I think that makes it even harder. If Mary Ann Williams was sort of choosing what the future might look like, or a few people like me, or if, specific companies might be doing that. But I think even big companies are struggling now. It's because the power is shifting to the people who use the technologies. And this is what we're seeing with ChatGPT. And you'll recall from, I think my third session where I showed that graph of traditional machine learning. So it plateaued, and, that wasn't foreseeable. In the early days, we didn't know if it would, how long it would take. And, in the fullness of time, we discovered it. Today, we don't know what deep learning is going to do. Will it plateau? And if so, when? Or will it just continue? So that is really the question. If it continues, the world will look so much more different in 10 years. If it plateaus, in the next couple of years. And so I look to people who are closest to the tech to kind of get hints. So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he says things like, look, I don't think the models are going to get bigger or even that much better. That tells you something. That tells you he thinks it's slowing down. He thinks we're going to plateau probably in the next few years. That's just his position. I mean, it doesn't mean he's right, but I think that is kind of a valuable piece of evidence. So I guess I want to start by saying, there's just so much we don't know. And it's not about forecasting, it's about shaping and building and choosing. And really the pendulum is on our side, which I think is a good thing. But what do we know? We know lots of stuff as well. We know that generative AI in particular is a game-changing, just totally revolutionary technology. If there was no more development, I mean, we can do amazing things with what we have already. And an interesting comparison I always enjoy is the one with electricity, because electricity changed every single industry, over 100 years. It's still changing industries today, like, electric vehicles. And generative AI, so electricity allows you to turn a light on, turn a dark room into a light room. That's pretty cool and pretty amazing, right? Makes our lives a lot simpler, makes the washing machine go. But generative AI uplifts deeply human capabilities, creativity, curiosity, education, experimentation, and in particular, innovation. So it opens the door to innovation like nothing else ever. And that's just going to drive change in extraordinary ways that no one has ever seen before. And this is why those scientists signed that letter, because are we really ready? What if kind of the wrong people get sort of in front of the steering wheel and take us in a particular direction? And, it's sort of all too little too late. So I think that, generative AI will certainly profoundly change everything. But the technologies that we see today are very kind of early stage. ChatGPT, it has been launched. It's a wild experiment, to see what happens. OpenAI took it as far as they could. They made it as safe as possible, and they did do some really good work around safety. They released it, and now they are learning. So they are still in the launch phase. We talked about 3 phases of innovation. They're still in the 2nd phase, and they're a long way from really accelerating. And well, we may see regulation slow things down a little bit as well. So last year, I spent a lot of time trying to describe generative AI, text-based, and it was like trying to describe some sci-fi technology, right? But within 5 minutes, after you've played with ChatGPT, suddenly something happens. And I remember when this happened to you, Sam, you told me, I'm addicted. I just can't stop playing with it. It's just got me totally and utterly hooked. I need to find out what it can do and what it can't do, but basically I'm mainly finding out what it can do, right? And that's because we're all being fairly creative in the prompts that we're creating. It is a black box. I mean, we don't know how it works. Even the people who made it don't know how it works. And so it's just been a really exciting time of discovery. And I feel like everyone has opened up to kind of thinking about the world differently. And that is ignition. That is going to ignite, as I said earlier, just unbelievable new sort of ideas and things that we can do. So what can leaders do? I think leaders just have to invest in the skills of innovation. How do you do it? And that's basically all the things I said in my kind of session that are really important. And sometimes, well, we have a saying, don't we? Curiosity kills the cat. Well, that is sort of trying to make people afraid to be curious. And there is a cost to curiosity, right? If everybody's curious, everyone's investigating, everyone's kind of experimenting. But seriously, that's the world we will be in, because no one will have answers. No one will know what's going to happen. We will have to be running experiments all the time. And that's what we will be doing. The technology will just be doing all of the kind of routine stuff, the stuff that stops us from being curious, right? Because we've got to fill in that form. We've got to, send that email. So I feel like we'll be shifting from this idea of, scale and growth, right, to just speed and acceleration, trying to see around the corner, trying to figure out what's going to happen next. That is the new game. And that's not an easy thing or an easy world to prepare for. Okay. But I do think that understanding how innovation, well, first of all, what it is and how you can do it and how you can engage your team to be more innovative. Because if you don't innovate quickly, then what are you going to do? There won't be much to do. So I think leaders can also look at the trends out there, the not mega trends so much in technology, but more around where people and customers see value. And sustainability is sort of, it took a while to get going, and it is really racing ahead. I mean, there was more investment in, say, climate tech last year than in any other technology. Of course, this year it's probably AI or AI fueled climate tech. So sustainability is going to become really important. And that crossover between automation and augmentation of people. There aren't that many technologies out there that are fully autonomous. I mean, most technology are a partnership between people and technology. You know, think of the car. The car, you know, well, we don't have cars that can drive themselves. We do have, you know, some examples of cars that can drive on a beautiful day in an area that they're familiar with. As soon as it rains or snows or someone spills oil on the road, or, you know, we have problems. And that problem is not going to be solved probably in the next decade, but let's see. I don't know. And
Can I jump in, Marianne?
People, yes?
Sorry, there's just a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
And I guess I mean, you kind of have a consistent theme with a lot of our other panelists, like the possibility to predict the future. But I don't know, just kind of what you were saying earlier about when you talk to Lyria, how you always kind of learn something with every kind of interaction. I think the same can be said with you. Just there's always so many little wise nuggets. And I think something that I personally haven't really thought of in terms of why this is kind of different in the next 10 years than kind of the previous century or centuries, is that kind of idea of tech being much more democrative, where everyone kind of can have access to it. And we're finally seeing that with social media now. And now that really looks like it's going to transfer over to innovation. But I'm going to jump into some of the questions. So the first question is from Jason Harkins, who's an AGSM alum, currently in Colorado. Go Nuggets. So the question is, how do we tackle the ethics of generative AI and how it creates content based on the efforts of previous creators? Currently, if I create a unique style in art or writing, I can legally go after an individual who copies that style. So how do we protect the original creators in a new world of generative AI?
Yeah, so look, I think that really gets to the heart of this kind of challenge around AI and why a lot of people are actually afraid of it, right? And what we're seeing is that AI has sort of digested everything humans have ever created, and now it's able to use it all at once. And that means it can outperform us. And, you know, maybe not on everything yet, but, you know, we can join the dots and see where that's going. And so, you know, I think that the way we can kind of begin to try and set ourselves up for success in this new world, all right, is to first really understand the problem. You know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? We never want to do that. What we need to know is exactly where the gaps are and where we need to actually, you know, do something. And it's sort of, it's not rocket science, okay? We've done this plenty of times before. We've also done quite a lot of experiments in law. If you look around the world, there's a lot of experiments going on all the time. Different countries have different laws. They play out in different ways. So there's quite a bit of experimentation and testing to learn from. But the first thing we need to know is, where are our current laws failing us? So we know copyright law can really only be applied to a person, and an AI isn't a person, it's just a tool. So, that's, I think, a fairly kind of easy fix. And we can reshape copyright law to take that into account. But we also have to be aware that there's a number of artists who actually feel like this tool helps them be even more artistic. And certainly in science, we're hearing that scientists can do better work and solve problems faster. I mean, we now know the structure of every single protein known to man because of AI. To do that without AI, I mean, probably would never achieve it. Okay, so we can fix things that we need to, and things like attribution and licensing, because we don't want to lose that part of being human, which I think is really the kind of the risk here, which was identified in the question, right? How do we attribute it? And to figure that out, we obviously need to understand the technology, the creative process that AI is using in a specific case. There's already actually challenges in court around AI. Different companies are suing them, like Getty. They've got all the photographs because the companies that are producing generative AI haven't really told us what data they're using, right? We can guess. And I think this is where having access to GPT and other generative AI is so helpful, because we're getting a taste of what it could be without really having to commit or even having the law that says it's okay or not okay. This is a time to really explore, what's out there, because we could shut chat GPT and other generative AIs down tomorrow. I mean, we just introduced law, they're gone. And then what wouldn't we learn? Okay. So I think if you're curious, you will want to know that. We all want to know that. We want to answer those questions. We can put it back in the box if we need to. And I think the last thing is there's laws that you wouldn't necessarily associate with, say, copyright, that could also be brought to bear, like competition law. If we compete with AI, how does competition law change? Do we need to protect some industries or some human endeavors? So I think we need to, find the gaps in our current, sort of more relevant law, and then look at other laws where we can draw, inspiration, or literally just copy and paste and kind of put it in, adapt it to what we're really trying to solve. Okay, so that would be my answer. I think let's find out what the problem is by using these technologies. We uncover them every day, and then we can over time digest and figure out. Yeah, so I'm very confident that at the end of the day, we will have a solution that does promote intellectual property creation, because that is at the heart of, prosperity. And if 9 big companies, Google, Microsoft, all the Chinese big companies, get very, very wealthy, I mean, where's the money going to come from? I mean, they do need a large population who can buy things, and you know what I'm saying? So there's going to be a need to protect human ingenuity and human creativity. Otherwise, I think the world really breaks in a way that nobody wins.
I think there's a very interesting trade-off that you bring up there. Kind of just while these tools can harm artists and their reputations, it obviously can help them do things they've never done before. And I think the most recent kind of big news example of this is Sir Paul McCartney of the Beatles. I think was just recently in the news saying like they are going to produce the last Beatles record, because there is a tape of John kind of recording a song, just a little demo, that the rest of the Beatles tried to create a record around, but the voice was just too muffled and they couldn't isolate it from the piano. But now with AI and, obviously there's lots of data around John Lennon's voice, and also techniques that actually clearly separate out the instruments from the voice. they are now going to use AI to put together this kind of last Beatles record. So, which is pretty exciting if you're a Beatles fan.
Yeah.
But now let's turn to the live cues, and we will start with Carrie. So Carrie says, valuable practical sessions, Marianne. Thank you, exclamation mark. In your experience, where do you think Australia ranks globally as an innovative country? And I don't really understand what this next part means because I am not overly familiar with cricketing, being relatively still new to the country. But in cricketing terms, is Australia in the first XI or still in the under 14 Ds?
Look, you have to give us a patchy report, okay? I did note the place we do worse is in university industry collaboration. And I don't really know why, but it's really holding us back, especially now, because AI left the lab more than a decade ago. It's really industry leading and it's problems leading, and I think, all of the early research did happen in universities, but, it's now being kind of unleashed. And Australia, this is where we're going to really find ourselves in a lot of trouble soon. If we don't fix the university collaboration problem and really sort of connect our sort of ideas engines and our student training to the problems out there, then we'll be very much left behind. Because a lot of these models and technologies are locked up in businesses like OpenAI. They haven't revealed very much about, even the models this time on GPT-4. And they're certainly not telling us where the data is coming from. So how do we get access? The US government knows far more about Australian citizens than our own government because all our data is accessible to those companies. And so, look, if you look at the metrics and the indices that are out there, Australia does okay, all right? We're sort of, we're not punching above our weight, that's for sure. And there are some real standouts, like we invented Wi-Fi, CSIRO nailed Wi-Fi. That's pretty amazing. And we've got a lot of other, amazing things like the bionic ear. But I think as a nation, pulling it all together is still a kind of an open problem, but it's also where we can win, because one of our big advantages is that, we are a fairly harmonious kind of society. We've got strong laws, we've got an awesome university system. And so if we can get all of those working together, then we can really be a player. Because other countries, even leaders, think of the US and China, they have a lot of problems. I mean, the US, a lot of kind of social issues. I mean, they talk about them themselves, the big bubbles and echo chambers, and, that's just going to slow them down. And in other places like China, you have legal issues, a lot of other stuff going on. So Australia, I think, can really position itself if we can get our act together and we get the key elements working hand in hand. So, for example, if universities suddenly produced, thousands of new graduates skilled in AI, but also the various applications, we introduce it into all the curriculums in law, in, in science, wherever, nursing, medicine. Well, if there are no jobs, then that's a problem, right? So if we've got to coordinate, to me, it's more a coordination issue for us. And if we can actually do it, and I think the government is really listening and trying to figure it out, and it does need, these kinds of problems do need government intervention. It's clear. This is not something the market can fix, right? This is a real leadership problem or challenge for a nation, right? And that is the game. And I think that Australia's kind of well placed because we've got all the elements. What we've got to do is get those elements integrated and really working, seamlessly. And that's going to create a lot of, that's going to require a lot of innovation, doing things differently, and in a kind of a culture of, let's see what we can do and let's do experiments. Yeah, that's it. I'll stop talking.
All right. Thank you. So The next question, and this is a pretty specific question. So it starts, same thing. Hi, Marianne. Thank you so much for your lectures. Another exclamation mark. I was really interested in the Gartner hype cycle, as I feel it's a really useful tool for individuals and corporations to inform themselves about upcoming innovations which might impact the future. So my question is, are there limitations to the methodology Gartner uses? Do they have inherent biases which might affect their predictions?
Yeah, of course, all predictions have bias. You know, we talked about bias lurking everywhere. Look, bias, not all bias is bad. Bias actually lets us get on with life. You know, if we didn't have bias, it would take us forever to make a decision. We'd be procrastinating. We wouldn't have those rules that, you know, that make us and help us just do stuff, right? The problem is when those bias drive us to do something that was, you know, maybe not so smart. Okay, that's the issue, right? And so that's why we need to diagnose, you know, what bias are at play here in any decision. Some we can ignore, you know, but some we need to deal with. And now let's, you know, turn this to the Gartner. So I don't think Gartner, you know, a lot of the consulting companies, they do not lay bare their methodologies or their data, right? But anyway, if it's a forecast, it's like, what, this is our best guess, you know, we'll take everything we know into consideration. And this is what we're, you know, willing to actually put out there. And I think that's probably the best we can do. If they're wrong, they fix it. Okay, we have to wait for a year. But I think that we just use it for, you know, what it is. And I think you're right. It is particularly useful just to have a way of thinking about things, because we're very much stuck in the hype of generative AI right now. We're living it. And you can follow this technology, and, you know, many technologies, by the way, just drop off. They you know, get to the high heights and then they're never seen again. And we know that 90% actually, that's the usual pathway. So the question always is, well, will this technology make it? And that's what we're looking for. And a technology makes it when people figure out how to adapt it to create value. If we don't do that, you know, it's gone, we move on. And this is why innovation is really hard, because sometimes you could be too early. You know, no one's ready to, you know, adopt and then adapt it to create value. And also it could be too late. And I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot of, you know, there's a lot of new technologies came up and reaching a peak, and then they just got wiped out by generative AI because they were solving a similar problem. You know, they were trying to extract data or information in a way that ChatGPT just does instantaneously, real fast, for free, more or less. So, you know, it's a very kind of dynamic process, and Gartner, they do a pretty good job. All right. And so I'm glad that you're going to be paying attention to it now. And of course, we want to know where Gartner's going to put generative AI. You know, has it just moved up a little bit, not quite peaked? If it hasn't peaked, that means that this hype is still going to keep on going. If it's peaked, that means that people have already digested what it is, what it might do, and all of the fear that comes with that. And then we're going to say, okay, let's make this real. What can it really do? We know it hallucinates. Is that going to stop us from diagnosing cancer? So that's when all these big questions get answered. And then it only has a short time to prove itself. And I think this is where the legal stuff becomes super important, because if any country puts the brakes on too soon, then they it keeps going, like all the other countries don't, and they sort of ride it, and it becomes real. So it is a really dangerous game here. And I think this is where Australia is kind of at risk, because we have a terrible record, by the way. We invested in vacuum tubes instead of resistors back in the 50s. So we're not that good. And I think largely because we've just got pockets of expertise. We don't have this really broad base of expertise across everything like very, you know, big countries can, you know, countries with The US is 10 times bigger than us. So they have fewer gaps. They can sort of get a smoother kind of way to interpret things and do things. Also, because they're bigger, they're a bit slower, and that can help you keep a technology alive longer, okay? Because if you move fast, you've killed it before it's actually had a chance to survive and get to the plateau of productivity.
So I guess with that, I mean, I think two things that really stood out to me just kind of there was one, and again, this is just a fantastic quote from your lectures: innovation is hard to nail and hard to scale, which I guess really gets at the heart of that 90%. And then I think the other thing that people should, I guess, just keep in mind when they're actually looking at these technologies and considering the hype cycles, and the reason why the predictions can be off is kind of what you referred to just with generative AI is doing. But I remember there's an HBR article probably about 5-10 years ago called Big Bang Disruption. And the example they used was Google Maps, and how, Google just, they didn't go out to just completely disrupt everything, but just the release of Google Maps basically put all these companies, all these sat nav companies that had spent years and years and years building up their innovations in their business pretty much obsolete, because Google Maps was given away for free and was better just using completely different technologies. So it's just really interesting that, that obviously these large language models are probably going to be this big bang disruption, which just kind of completely offsets a lot of these predictions from the Gartner hype cycle. And what is a big bang disruption versus just a normal disruption is probably hard to anticipate a priori. So the next question that we have is from Laura, who asks, how might we use AI, and sorry, Laura, but I'm going to broaden this, and or innovation to strengthen democracy in Australia?
Okay. Look, I think that there are so many things that are just wrong and that need to get fixed, okay? And this is one of the things I'm enjoying about AI. I've been working sort of on the tech side for more than 30 years. And what I am loving is to see how AI and other technology is highlighting the really big problems that were underground, okay, and not seen, bringing them to the fore such that you can no longer ignore them. So, for example, judges in the US giving people of dark skin longer sentences for the same crime. Now, no one's going to challenge a judge, or if they do, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be complicated. But if an AI says, hey, look, we found this pattern, there it is, that's what the data says, we can challenge it, we can talk about it, and we can begin to think about how we might address it. I think that is probably the most valuable service that these technologies are kind of doing for us when we're thinking about, how society works. How can we make the world work better? I mean, technology is a kind of a critical piece that is driving everything, how we do everything, So therefore, if we can kind of shape it and take it where we want it to go, right, in a democracy, then that's very powerful. Okay, and I think that that's probably how it's going to happen. And the more we all know how to use these technologies, what can it do? It's very hard to kind of change things with a technology that you don't know what it can actually do. So that's the first step. And that's going to take a while with these technologies, because as I, said, we're going from a bicycle to an intergalactic spaceship, and one that no one knows how to steer because the people who built it also don't know. Okay. So that is a massive leap. And it's a dangerous time. When people moved from bicycles or from horses to cars, people fall off, we have car crashes. And actually, that's not a bad example. I'm just thinking of this on the fly, because many people die in car accidents every year. And society has a kind of a threshold. We're willing to allow cars to drive and still have a certain number of people die. But, if that number got up to 50%, we probably want to relook at that. And so I think society has these sort of natural ways of calibrating and, changing. But basically, technology pushes and law kind of constrains and shapes. So we've moved from the tech now, I think, in terms of the conversation, it was all chat GPT, generative AI. But now, this is a big wave of responsible AI coming. And even the Australian government has picked up on that and wants to be sort of a leader there. That is a very good sign, but that's where the battle's going to be. And I think that, and society and democracy are kind of going to fall out of that collision.
Thanks. And I think that probably that response partly answers Jackie's question on how AI can change the world we live in. And I think it's kind of what's interesting also with AI and democracy is that they're just, I guess, like everything with AI, it's just going to be trade-offs. On one hand, it will create so much noise with, particularly with generative AI, that will just confuse people and just kind of, obviously promote fake news and that type of content and deep fakes. But on the other hand, there's some really cool new technology around what's called decentralized autonomous organizations, which is really all about kind of using AI to be much more democratic and kind of using like principles of RAI, like transparency, by combining it with blockchain technology to actually make things more democratic. But I think for the next question, I'm going to edit Dana's question a little bit. So her full question is about responsible AI in the government, but she has a very interesting, actually, last part, which I think I would like to focus on. So the question is, given that responsible AI is heavily principled, can we rely on government business to use it responsibly? But I think rather than focus on that, the second part is, how does kind of AI kind of impact societal norms? And I think this also ties to some of the other questions that are kind of coming in. So I think maybe we'll go with that, Dana. Sorry to alter it a little bit from exactly where you're going, but how is AI and responsible AI or generative AI going to impact societal norms?
Yeah. So look, I think technology doesn't do anything really. It's only in the hands of humans, right? And that's where the control is. All right. I mean, AI to me is just a tool. It's an amazing tool. But it's not making decisions. It doesn't have a moral basis. It's currently ingested every piece of information that any person has ever produced, and it can retrieve it instantaneously. It can package it in any way you kind of want it. So how are people going to use that is really what the question is. And I think that we hopefully are going to try and use it for making the world better, right? But we know that people are actually mainly driven by self-interest. Sadly, it's true. People, in order to kind of get that bigger thing, we need groups of people to work together. But, I mean, that can also go bad, right? You can have people working for, they think they're doing the right thing, but they're going after something that has consequences they're not even aware of, right? And so this is why the scientists have signed that letter, okay? Because we don't know how people might use it. We don't know what could not so much go wrong, but what might sort of happen when you mix things together. Because one of the things we know just from basic science is that if you just have a small number of entities and they interact, in a dynamic world, they can really create something that is very different from those three things. And so, that's kind of what we don't know. I mean, is the question asking, okay, what could we do, in the law? What can the responsible AI kind of principles and guidelines and recipes do? And I think, yeah, that they are sort of important, because I'll tell you why I think it's important, all right? who is building these technologies? It's not really a great representation of society, okay? If you lifted the lid on, the people building these models at Google or OpenAI, it's mainly a certain kind of person, usually young, kind of males. And, while they're all, potentially well-intentioned, there's no natural kind of mediation around diversity. Okay. And it's quite hard, empathy is not that easy, right? And also just really understanding someone's experience, someone else's experience is really hard. We think we can do it, but we don't do it very well, right? And I think this is sort of the underlying issue. We've had more representation. We're more inclusive in how we actually design these systems. We will get a better and fairer outcome. And I think this is something that is difficult to fix. How can we get more women? How can we get more people from the fringes of society involved in designing technology? Does that mean they have to learn computer science? Well, with generative AI, I think the opportunity is they don't. We don't. Technology has been democratized, and that is what it means. It means that we can all build things now. Interesting things, quickly, cheaply. That gives everybody an in. And that is why actually I think the most important thing is that everybody plays and everybody should get to play. Banning these sort of technologies, especially now they're already out of the bottles, not very helpful, right? We all need to very quickly get everybody on board, get as many people using it so that we get a feel for, what it can do. And it is vaguely possible. When people see how kind of easy, it's a very loaded word, it is, that they might be more encouraged and feel like they could actually make a difference. And if everyone understands how you can do innovation in 3 easy steps, then there's the tool. You need to create value, just go. You don't need a computer science degree. You don't need an exclusive kind of education, or you don't need to be a guru. There it all is. And let's get started. And I feel like, there's
Okay.
hope, at least.
Well, even though we only have about 2 minutes left, maybe we'll go about 2 minutes over, but I want to ask one last question that actually combines a few questions from the Q&A. So from Hamilton, we have, when will a committee be formed to connect education, jobs, and research? It isn't that hard. Communication. And this closely relates to Carrie's question that says, you talked about the need for universities and business in Australia to become better engaged. Do you see the Commonwealth Government CRC grant program becoming a catalyst for greater engagement between our universities and the business community?
Yes and yes. Okay, so look, there is no one model. We need lots of different models because they sort of achieve different things and they're suited to different kinds of projects. One of the ways you really scale innovation, well, there's 2 ways to scale things, right? You can just get something and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And as things get bigger, they kind of get less agile, they get less flexible, they get less, adaptable. And so, they kind of stop kind of delivering value. Another really great way to scale is to franchise, copy, replicate. That's what DNA does. It's kind of what ChatGPT does. This is the fastest way to scale. It's the fastest way to scale excellence. And I think that we need to be doing that kind of scaling. Wherever something is working, 10x it, okay? So if that research group is doing, great work, 10x it. We've got to 10x everything we have, because otherwise we will definitely be left behind. And when we 10x, that means we need a lot of people who understand what that even means, right? How to create value for customers, how to, come up with ideas, and how to experiment. So these are skills we all need to learn very, very quickly, because the future is uncertain. No one can predict it. The only way is to test things, come up with ideas and test them, put them out there, see what happens, pick up the good things that work and, move the things that didn't work to the side, and just keep going and go faster and faster. And, to do that comfortably and, risk lower the risk, right? So we don't get, because, it doesn't really make sense to scale the 90% failures, right? We want to scale, but we want to also be more successful, right? So that means you do need to learn these techniques. I've just scratched the surface of them in my talks, but I hope I've made you at least curious to dig deeper and to discover these sort of the needs and the skills, so that you can actually contribute and help scale all the great things that we already have.
I think, and that's, I guess, a perfect ending point. And I was just going to say, as we're wrapping up, first, thank you, Marianne, and thank you for your modules. And I thought they really actually did a very good job of really kind of connecting all the different pieces together, from digital transformation, emerging tech, and responsibility from the previous modules, to really show how adopting this be curious mindset can really help you lead across all these frontiers by really, leading through innovation. So thank you very much, Marianne. I'd also like to thank, obviously, everyone here for tuning in and for asking, again, really thoughtful and engaging questions. I hope you really enjoyed this as much as we have. Unfortunately, this is our last live Q&A session of Learn to Lead 2023, and I hope you've all enjoyed the course and have come away with ways to, just be inspired and, to take practical steps to really lead your organizations and yourselves into the future. So thank you, stay curious, and depending on where you're joining us from, I'd like to wish you either a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, or a good night. Thank you, everyone.